Hello, friends. It's Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden, and I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle and Joy, and I've seen almost nothing.
And we just finished watching Almost Human Episode 9, Unbound. And bear with us for this summary because it gets away from us a little bit, so just hang on. When an XRN breaks out of the evidence locker and goes on a relatively targeted killing spree, John and Dorian seek the help of the man who not only programmed her, but who also created the DRNs. And then in the biggest twist yet, he was behind it all and escapes to build his own robot army.
Hoo boy.
Does that cover it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, we're going to dive deep into quite a bit of that, including that escape, when we get into the meat of this episode.
I know you can't wait to talk about that escape.
Oh, I can't. I can't wait.
First, considering she shows up in the first 3 minutes of the episode, I do think we need to talk about Gina Carano. I'm very drawn to strong women, strong female leads, but also physically strong women. And her and Zoe Bell are like in my top two stunt ladies for a very long time. And amidst her current opinions on the internet, I'm not happy to see her anymore. And it's disappointing.
It is really disappointing because I'm with you on that one. Seeing a woman who is physically strong on screen was so exciting for such a long time. And as it turns out, Gina has some really, really problematic opinions. We're not going to get into those opinions in this podcast episode. That's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about androids in the future and synth pride. So if you want to know what those opinions are, Google it. The Google is in your pocket. You can get the details of that there. We just wanted to say up top that we don't condone any of those opinions.
We've said our piece.
That's all she wrote.
On to what the police were not prepared for this week. Which honestly wasn't that much. Well, the tech in the show was not too much to write home about. Although I did write down in very large letters, the printed flowers do need to be put in water.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That was actually the first text I sent Joy when I started the episode. I was like, my bad. The 3D printed flowers do, in fact, have to be put in water as soon as you get home. I still think that 3D printing flowers and fruits and vegetables, etc., could help save the planet, because then you could just 3D print them somewhere instead of having to grow them in a specific climate and then ship them across the entirety of a country. But there we are. The 3D flowers have to be put in water.
It was so close. It was so close to being a thing.
There was that little retinal scan for the lab where the XRN puts the eyeball in a knife and uses it to get into a laboratory. That really shouldn't work in 2048. You know, in 2048, I think that technology should be in a place where it can tell whether the eyeball is in a live person.
Right? It can tell if the iris has opened or closed or whatnot. You know, like, it should be able to tell. It didn't make any sense.
But there you go. That happened. You also wrote down that little Star Trek-y piece of technology.
I did. I wrote down that there's a healing scanner that one of the, I think it's actually one of the police officers, not a MX, right?
I think so.
That's like got over Vaughn's forehead. And there's like a gash on his forehead. And the closer I looked, I was like, I don't think it's doing anything. I think it's healing him. Maybe.
No,
I think it's supposed to. Maybe it's checking. Maybe it's antiseptic. I expected the thing to close up, and it didn't, which was a little upsetting, but it's fine.
No, that laceration was 100% still there.
Like, we even pan away from him a couple of times, and it keeps coming back to him, and I'm like, that gash hasn't improved. What are you doing?
Okay, then there was the tracking device that they built to track down Danica, which I only wrote down because the way that they put the unique energy signature into the USB, which they then plug into the computer, is to literally paint it onto the outside of the USB with what almost looks like a nail polish brush.
Yeah. Do we just have these at the ready? Like, every time an MX gets on the force, we take out a nail polish brush and use a little, I don't know, synthetic bio information. Like, what do you even...
I guess
how do you even do this?
I guess that's how information is transferred in 2048 with a brush. You don't drag files around. You put the information on a brush.
You don't click and drag. You
you put it on a brush and then you brush it on the outside of the USB.
It's 100% how that works. And no one will ever convince me otherwise.
I mean, that was most of the tech in the episode, with the obvious tech aside, which is the XRN, and we will get to that. There wasn't too much else. I did note the evidence warehouse. It's not a locker. It's a room. It's a warehouse.
It's definitely not a locker. It is its own basement.
Yes. Which in and of itself is not a piece of technology, but I wanted to just pause and discuss all of the technology that is stored inside the evidence locker, because there are questions such as, how did the service droid know where to find the head when everyone else has been searching for this head for 3, 4 months, 5, 6? We don't know how much time has passed.
At minimum, the show isn't terribly clear about how much time has passed, but every single time in the previous episodes, we've seen this evidence locker. It's been crawling with people, with MXs, with officers, like trying to find a thing. This time, they put this shot up service bot onto a shelf, and they walked away, and there's nobody else in that part.
Absolutely no one. It is a giant empty warehouse. Now, this is an example of something we're going to keep on having to do in this podcast episode, but maybe John Larroquette's character had already built a tracking device. And so the service bot knew how to find the head because he had already built a tracking device, and then he just pretended to build it again as a way to deceive the police force. Fine, maybe. But the show doesn't make that clear. So it was a question we asked. Question number 2, why did they save her head for 2 years?
And they established this in the episode. They laid siege to this one bot for 3 days. They lost their MX resources. They lost human beings.
26 police officers.
26 police officers who never came out of this building that she holed herself up in. Why would you, in any shape or form, save anything from something so homicidal as to completely deplete? Oh, I don't even remember what they said. Did they say how many districts came to help? They pulled in 3 days.
3 days.
I can't get past 3 days. Is that 72 hours?
Well, we're going.
It's hard to say. Did they take a break? Did they break for lunch?
Is it 7? I don't know.
Did they break for sleep? Oh, that's right. I asked you to do math. I'm sorry.
What? I don't know.
It's my fault. It's entirely my fault.
Well, okay, wait. Can we also just pause for a second and discuss that when they attacked with everything, the everything they attacked with included, according to Kennex, light bombs?
Yes.
So a light bomb wasn't able to take out this XRN? I have questions. But first, I have to finish talking about the evidence warehouse. The third thing is that once the XRN manages to put herself together, she then equips herself because there are guns, grenades, tactical gear, and ammunition just for the taking. Along with, by the way, an entire, just very conveniently packaged briefcase of synthetic souls. This I don't
know if it's convenient. It kind of looks like a glass cannon.
Well, but you can just pick it up and take it.
Oh, that's true. It is a briefcase.
I really take issue with A, what is stored in the evidence warehouse, and B, how it is stored. Because they really set themselves up for failure there.
So much. There's a part of me that's look, I don't know a lot about how actual police departments function, but I know in a few of them, and again, this is just what I know from television, movies, but you lock up guns, and that seems like a thing that makes sense. And I can't imagine just having on a shelf a bunch of tactical weapons.
Right. Or, separate the gun from its ammunition, right? Maybe take the head apart instead of just storing it in a little box. There's so many things they could have done to make it real difficult for the 400% worse criminals to break into this building, equip themselves from head to toe with tactical gear, and then take down an entire precinct. But they have set up this warehouse, so that's precisely what this warehouse is for. It's like a gold mine.
Not only this reason would In Syndicate want to lay siege, but you also brought up the fact that she gets all this tactical gear, and it's all sitting right there, and the MXs could have this at any point in time.
I know. Oh, our poor toasters or bullet catchers.
Poor toasters. Oh, God, they catch every bullet. I don't understand, especially in this episode. I'm so sorry, friends of MXs. You lose a lot of friends in this episode.
Yes.
They go down like paper against this woman.
Yes, we were trying to keep track of how many MXs are just dispatched without a second thought. And our count suddenly went from 5 to 25 in the space of 15 minutes. It was the saddest thing. And
just because of this episode.
Yes, I guess that actually moves us pretty well into the biggest piece of tech the police were not prepared for in this episode, which was the XRN, or Danica, as they call her, herself.
Mm-hmm.
So Danica's original body was destroyed. They saved her head in the evidence locker for 2 years. And so as Joy said, Danica breaks out of the evidence warehouse and is running on a secondary power source, and so has to go and find a new body, which is how she ends up at Dr. Nigel's lab, where she gets just a second android body.
And I don't know, at least she just picks the one in lingerie, I guess, because she thinks it looks nice.
Because if she thinks it looks nice? Well, see, since it was in lingerie, that made me think that was a sex bot body.
That also made me think this as well.
Really, really makes me wonder why she is so much more bulletproof than the MXs. That's a sex bot body. That don't know. That seems very strange to me. It's either her body is for some reason more bulletproof than the MXs, or the tactical gear that she picked up in the warehouse is what's making her super bulletproof, which is why Joy and I were asking, why isn't every single MX in that tactical gear?
Yeah, and I think, as you pointed out, even sometimes the bullets ricochet off her armor.
Yep.
And I'm
just like, you can literally hear like a ping, 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 and they're just popping off. What?
I mean, it has to be the stuff she picked up in the locker. It has to be that. I do appreciate that you were like, she was very robust to begin with, because it's 3 days before they take her out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just a head.
It's just
Just a head.
She is a whole new body. And listen, like, maybe that head is full of, like, she's really good at aiming a gun. She's really good at hand-to-hand combat. She's like, I understand that all of that can be programmed into an android. But bulletproof can't be programmed into an android.
This is true. She should still be catching bullets. Although, well, I have another thought about that, which is a little bit dark, but that's fine. We've gone dark before. But there is something to be said about, and I think you pointed this out when we were talking about it, of having an android that could possibly malfunction, and therefore you don't want them to be as fully armored.
Yes. Like,
so
the MXs are built to be disposable. In case they malfunction, they can be easily taken down by humans.
Yeah.
Is that? I mean, I hear you. I agree. I think that makes sense with what the show has constructed for us thus far. A, I don't like it. B, then are they really going to help the police force combat the criminality that is 400% worse? Or
are they just catching bullets?
I don't like any of it.
Are they built to be like walking bulletproof, quote unquote, vests? Like, I don't like it.
To just like throw themselves in front of police officers and take the hit, you know? But then Maldonado always gets so upset when one of them is destroyed because they're so expensive, which like very expensive bullet catchers. What if they just put every single police officer in the tactical gear that Danica was wearing? Because, you know, those bullets just pinged right off. They did nothing to her.
I mean, hashtag 2048 is bleak. Do you not have the budget?
But they do have the budget to keep making more and more MXs.
I know.
Maybe we need
What
to
if
just
you
have
just-
a conversation with their accounting department, rework that police budget a little bit. We think your money could be spent elsewhere, and here's where we think it could be spent.
Yeah. No, I mean, creating bots for the police force isn't as easy as it looks. But also, if you've got that contract, maybe. Oh boy. Yeah, no, it's definitely it says such weird stuff about the year 2048. Like all of it. The I don't know where these pieces fall into place, but wow, I don't like where they're falling.
I know. And like, I think that the other thing that the police force wasn't really ready for in this episode was really John Larroquette's character, Dr. Nigel Vaughn.
Yes.
Because they really just played right into his plan. You know, every single thing that he thought they would do, they absolutely did, including that final fight with the XRN. Because Joy and I were talking about this, and we were like, hold on. If this XRN is as deadly as the show has taught us, Kennex and Dorian shouldn't have lasted a second in a fight with her. You know, they were wildly outmatched. She's punching them with, I suppose, she's punching them and they're surviving, you know, and taking the hit. And she's not, when she stole that cab, she just killed the cab driver. It took her 2 seconds, and she should have done the same thing to Kennex, and she should have done the same thing to Dorian. But the way that we were able to make sense of this...
somehow she didn't. I don't understand.
Well, the way that we were able to make sense of this is that maybe John Larroquette's character told her, listen, break into this party, kill the... Was it a council member? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was like a congressman or
like a congressman. I don't know.
It was politician number 3.
Yeah, exactly. Get into that party, kill the politician if you can. But really what he wanted was for her to make that fight last as long as possible so that he could then escape. So I think that's what was going on there, but it's one of those things where you have to kind of squint and tilt your head and make it make sense, because it doesn't really.
It's not even plot holes, right? Like, it's just a thing where I'm like, maybe there were things cut from the episode.
Yeah.
That made other things make sense, you know, which I know sometimes happens. Sometimes the script runs long and you have to trim things down. But there was a lot that I had to kind of tilt my head sideways and look at it through like a Coke bottle to figure it out. It was weird.
Now, Joy, before we move into the main topic of this episode, is there any other tech that you wanted to get out of the way?
Yeah, I mean, the service bot was kind of interesting, but I think, I don't know if you want to talk about the fact that Rudy didn't recognize the service bot. That Rudy, who works on androids for a living, didn't recognize anything different with this service, like this worker bot, who I imagine is like, you know, on construction crews and like, you know what I mean? Like this,
a maintenance bot.
A maintenance bot. The police recognize this thing as soon as they shoot it. You know, they take off the mask and they're just like, oh, well, it's a service bot. Huh, that's weird. I guess it malfunctioned. And I'm just like, how often does that happen?
Right, very strange. But then Rudy has it in his lab. He takes it apart and he literally says, there's nothing unique or traceable about these materials. The only thing that's strange about it is this hidden secondary power source. But then later in the episode, Luther Estes, who's another robotics engineer, they bring him in as an expert witness, and he doesn't even hold the actual head in his hands. All he does is look at a photo of the head. And he goes, oh no, this is not a normal worker bot. These are cutting edge designs. These concepts are just being theorized in top robotics universities in the world. These are palladium encrusted circuits. That's really expensive. And then he's able to come up with the type of person he thinks created this bot. Like, oh, this work is raw. They're not beholden to conventions. They might be young, but it probably just means that they aren't operating underneath, you know, under normal circumstances, which fits John Larroquette's character perfectly. He doesn't have a licensed lab. He's lost his license. So I was just, this is also, by the way, the part in the episode where they mention New Tokyo as a place that is not local. So, what happened to Tokyo?
What happened to Tokyo?
I don't know. We're not going to find out.
I don't want to dwell on it.
But yeah, you're right, Joy. That was a big piece of tech.
I do think it's interesting that all other times Rudy has been able to be like, this is so weird. And like, blah, blah, blah. And this one time he was like, I'm not noticing anything different. Here's an expert. Why don't you ask him?
Rudy was wrong. So wrong.
Rudy was wrong. And it was weird. I had a weird moment with that because I was like, what is happening to my boy?
I mean, I guess Rudy's allowed to make mistakes. He's only human,
That's true. And I think this actually does lead nicely into our episode-specific thing, which is the relationship between Nigel and Dorian, but also Nigel himself. And Nigel Vaughn is a very interesting character where I think we haven't really seen an interesting villain since Eurythmia. He has this sort of air about him that, of somebody who was reaching for something intangible and trying to do the impossible and essentially achieved it. Like, he achieved the thing he was trying to do, which was to create the synthetic soul and to breathe life into androids that was closest to human as possible. And he did it, and then his entire career tanked because of it. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't blame the DRNs for this. He doesn't appear to have them in any way, shape, or form responsible for this failing. I don't think he thinks he failed with the synthetic soul. And I tend to agree with him. I think, and even Rudy is just like, you did something amazing and nobody was ready for it. And I don't think that's your fault. And I do think when Dorian shows up on the, as Kennick's partner, there's a look in Nigel's eyes that you cannot fake of he probably had a plan in place, right? Because having watched the episode, we know he planned to deceive everybody and run away with all this tech. Mm-hmm. He probably had information laid out of how he was going to do this. And he has other worker bots. We see him at the end, how he was going to strategically get the pieces he needed to eventually get to where he was going to make his robot army. Mm-hmm. But as soon as he sees Dorian, he sort of stops in his tracks and is just like, you're still a police officer? Mm-hmm. And he says, yeah, they call me Dorian. And of course, he's just like, of course they do.
Oh, that moment where he's caressing Dorian's face and just looking into his eyes. I do think that was sincere. And I think that when he says that he loves the DRNs, that is a real feeling.
Yeah, I agree. I think he does look on the DRNs as his children, which he even says in the episode. And Dorian definitely looks up to him as, a creator and a father. And I don't know if this was built into the DRNs themselves to have this reference or if they just created it on their own. They don't really go into that, but it definitely, you get the feeling that Dorian's definitely programmed to recognize him on sight as the person who created him because he's currently living under a different name. And Dorian's like, that's not who that is. That's Nigel Vaughn. That's the guy who created me. I did actually appreciate that it was sort of a mirror of earlier in the episode where the XRN sort of shows up and Dorian is like, what is that? And no one tells him what it is. Oh. And then there's this moment where Dorian almost doesn't say who Nigel is.
Yes.
I'm just like, I have my own secret. Ha ha ha.
See how that feels?
How do you like it? But no, they do have a very father-son relationship. And I do think Nigel also has the option to exploit that.
Yes.
Because there is a moment, and you and I had talked about this, where there's this established, Dorian doesn't know what an XRN is. The information was scrubbed completely. He has absolutely no reference for an XRN. And it was a little bit Thor Ragnarok, what do you mean I have an evil sister out there? I don't trust that. I believe my dad.
Totally. And Kennick's does tell him the story of the XRN and that 3-day siege, etc. But I do think that hearing the story from a police officer is very different from if, for example, he had access to the footage and he was able to see all of that taking place the way that Kennex and the other police officers who were actually on the scene would have experienced it, because it's something that he knows about his dad, essentially, but he isn't quite able to internalize how horrible it is.
Mm-hmm. Just like a human being would, where it's like if somebody you get this secondhand story of this horrible thing, you're not instantly going to believe it and understand it. And Vaughn is sort of able to, you see it happen, which I thought was fascinating, where Vaughn has this moment of like, you know, Dorian is like, we're not defined by our past. It's what we do now that defines us. And Vaughn has a moment where, you know, he's looking at Dorian and he has this very proud father face. And then his expression changes. And you could look at that as, okay, I'm going to help you guys out. And, you know, I may have a way to track Danica. Or you could look at that expression as, I could change my entire plan and get into the police's, like the police department's good graces long enough to get access to the tech I need and then dip.
Yep. Like maybe originally his plan was to take some service bots and storm the castle, as it were. And instead he gets to take advantage of Dorian and then ultimately betray him, which is, well, poor Dorian.
Which is very sad. There's a part of me that also understands the level of what they were trying to achieve, right? Because you have somebody, and we've seen this before in science fiction and fantasy, where you have somebody who kind of shows up and they are a parental figure or they are literally your parent and they're not perfect and they have flaws. And it's revealed to you through the narrative of like how they aren't perfect and how some of them can twist that against you. Vaughn is not interested in hurting Dorian physically. And I think he's not interested in hurting Dorian's feelings. But I do think he has, like, acceptable collateral damage.
Yeah, it was like, you know, even if he's not interested in doing it, he did do it.
He did. He done did it.
Oh, it's so unfortunate that Dorian was so willing to forgive him and so willing to say, like, listen, you did one thing. You made a mistake. You're human. It happens. What matters is what you do now. And then what Vaughn decided to do now was to betray Dorian, to kill a bunch of MXs and probably some police officers, to attempt to kill a politician, and then to escape and build his own robot army so that he can continue on his, you know, revenge rampage. Yeah. So,
100%. 100%. I think if Dorian hadn't been there, we would not have seen Vaughn as much as we did in the narrative. Like, I think Vaughn would definitely have been like, it can't possibly be me, and be constantly trying to throw them off his scent, as opposed to looking like he's working with the police department. And then realizing the acceptable losses of like, yeah, you know who I am, but I'm still able to like get out of here without anybody really noticing because I've created this little distraction for you all. I mean, I think it's beautifully complicated, which is the thing you want with a villain. And who even knows if he's actually a villain? He kind of disappears into the night.
Pretty sure he's a villain because he killed a bunch of MXs. And
okay, well, that's
probably some police
true.
officers and some innocent party goers. There were so many people.
And an innocent cab driver.
An innocent cab driver. You know, he didn't literally do that, but he programmed the thing that did that.
Through his actions, these people died.
Yes. There were people at that party who were just people at the party. There were people at the party who weren't invited. They were servers. They were caterers. You know, he bad.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, he's definitely a villain. That's a fair point. And I think he's complicated enough that you can't just slap him with like he just wants to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
I feel like he has, he stole 500 ZNA and like 500 synthetic souls.
What are those called? The processing cores.
Yep. He could be making 500 evil Dorians. We don't know. He also told Dorian, and I don't know if this was part of his plan or not, that there's no like mechanical difference between him and Danica. You know, and Kennex even has to reassure Dorian of like, he was in a different place when he made Danica.
Yeah.
Which he even said to Rudy, and, like, Kennex wasn't even in the room. It's like one of those rare moments of, like, Kennex understands people.
Which we'll get into.
He understood how to people. That's one time.
It's so okay. I'm glad that we're bringing that up, because it is kind of a funny thing where he says there's no mechanical difference between Dorian's synthetic soul and Danica's synthetic soul, but a soul by definition is different depending on the person that it is in, because a soul is intangible. And this is how he explains it. It's not like, oh, here's your DNA, your eyes are going to be blue. Here's your DNA, you're going to be tall. You get a soul, and it is whatever it is. There's no way to define it.
Yeah, it is an organic reaction to the world around you. Mm-hmm. And it's different for everybody.
And it's different for everyone.
Which makes perfect sense, because the DRNs didn't malfunction in the exact same way. Like, some of them, malfunctioned because of the things they were seeing. And, and that was what took them out. Some of them didn't malfunction at all. And some of them took this test and they decided they were or were not going to malfunction.
Yeah.
The Luger test, which we still don't have answers on, but that's fine.
I guess the thing is, if you're trying to build something that is a tool for you to use, you do not want it to be something unpredictable. You want it to do precisely the thing you want it to do when you want it to do the thing.
Yeah.
Which was a very ineloquent way of me explaining why ultimately the DRNs were decommissioned and replaced by the MXs, because the MXs are predictable. You know precisely what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. And with the DRN, you roll the dice.
It's like buying a hammer and then realizing it screws into the wall. And you're like, but that's not at all.
Right. Or sometimes it hammers, but sometimes if it's in a bad mood because you were 20 minutes late to pick it up, it's not going to hammer quite so well.
It's going to hammer diagonally instead of straight. I love the idea that a hammer could be mad at you.
I know.
How dare you?
That's what they got with the DRNs. They got hammers that could be mad at them, and then they decided they didn't want it. We don't want the hammers to be mad at us.
Don't buy a hammer if it's going to get mad at you.
Oh, boy. Speaking of hammers that can get mad at you, does that lead us pretty well into our synth pride and robotic parts?
Yes, because, well, I would posit that the hammer in this scenario is Kennex. Because he has once again forgotten how to people, and they let him around children. Why would they do that? Why would they do that?
Well, to give them a tiny, just like crumb of what's the word I'm looking for? To give them a tiny crumb of credit. Kennex was not leading the tour. They gave the tour to Dorian to lead. Kennex just crashed it. He crashed the tour.
That's correct. He definitely did.
Poor Dorian. He's so caught off guard. And it reminds me of, he was given this really big responsibility and he was going to lead the kids around the police precinct and show them all the places that he thought were most interesting. And then Kennex just comes in and just wipes Dorian right off his feet,
Just cowboys his way into that conversation. He's 100% playing cowboy. And he's drawing from the baser instincts of children and of just like, who wants to see where the guns are kept? And I'm just like, oh, you mean that like giant warehouse where you could just walk around and a kid could pick up a gun? Seems like a bad idea, Kennex.
Yep.
Who wants to see what happens to the bad guys? And just like the last time with the knife, like, what are you doing?
As Dorian says, he took it way too far. He then pulls up on a tablet, I guess some evidence from a case file, and he shows all of the children a bad guy who according to Kennex, has his arms just blown clean off. The kids are disgusted, and one of them literally throws up because what they're seeing is so graphic. I also noticed that in that scene, Kennex was like looking around a little bit as he was talking, and I wonder whether he was looking to see if Valerie could see how well he was doing with the children.
I mean, headcanon accepted. That's 100% what he was doing.
Is she here?
It
She's
is
seeing
now.
how good I am with kids? And then he made one throw up. Organics.
Yeah, he wasn't shining there. Always traumatizing the youths is what I wrote down.
That's great.
And yeah, but we did get some very, cute, sympathetic moments between the two of them. I think you said Kennex actually asked Dorian twice if he's okay
Yep,
in the episode.
he does.
And, sort of as I mentioned, Kennex actually is able to kind of, talk him down from having too many, emotional crises about the fact that his creator just betrayed them and stole a bunch of things to actually, possibly make some terrible, awful things happen. They also have, what do you even call that? It's like a high five, but it's broier.
It's where you slappy some skin. It's where you high five, but your hands stay holding partway through it.
It's exactly what that is. I don't know what to call that. I was like, hand clasp? What? This is how you know I'm not in the club.
I know. I'm not either. It was very cute though.
It was very cute. It was definitely a thing best buds do.
And it was right after Kennex has just been beat to a pulp by this XRN.
Oh yes,
and then
true.
And then he shakes out his synthetic leg and is kind of feeling it. This part of me feels good. So they hand clasp and Dorian is like, "Oh, you're still anti-synthetic?" And
That's
Kennex gets to say, "No, it's growing on me."
It's growing on me. I do feel like Dorian pulled that out of him like it hurt. Fine, I'll admit it.
And then the last synth pride moment in the episode is one that you had mentioned earlier, the one where Kennex is reassuring Dorian about the difference between him and Danica, despite the fact that their synthetic souls are mechanically, not similar, mechanically identical.
Yeah, every synthetic soul, I guess, is created the exact same way. And it's how it manifests in the bot that makes it different.
Exactly.
Which is not really something that's, and even Dr. Vaughn, talks about that of just, I was trying to create the intangible. And, I've done a lot of bad things, but the synthetic soul isn't one of them.
And Rudy agrees with him. The moment where he bows and addresses Dr. Nigel as Your Highness.
Also, Rudy works in a not church.
Oh, that's so true.
There was stained glass on the ceiling, and
oh yeah, for sure. That's a church that's been refurbished.
That is definitely a church that's been refurbished.
Which does that about take us to the end of the episode, Joy?
I think it does. I think that brings us to our one more thing, and I know your one more thing is going to go long. Well, maybe not go long, but I know you have a lot of words.
Well, we'll see.
Do you want to go?
Do you want to go first?
I think I'll go first because we just sort of ended on Kennex being a good person. So why don't I bring it down? Why don't I bring him down a peg? The fact that Richard Paul gets the pronouns right on this android, and Kennex still says it. In the canonical episode 9, which also was supposed to be episode 9, he is still saying it, and it really irks me the wrong way. And it's just see, you're making me so mad, I have to give Richard Paul credit. And no one likes that. We don't like that on this show.
I don't enjoy giving Richard Paul credit, but you're absolutely right. Every time Kennex refers to Dorian specifically, he remembers to use he, him pronouns, but is just entirely incapable of extending it beyond the person that he knows.
Right. And it feels gross.
Yeah. Agreed.
But yes, so what is your one more thing, Danielle?
My one more thing, predictably, if you've been listening to every episode of our podcast, is the wall. I got so excited when they mentioned the wall at the beginning of the episode, and they mention beyond the wall as a possibility, like a place that people would go if they wanted to experiment and do things outside the government or the police force's purview, if they wanted to be off the grid. And I thought that was super interesting. I'll also note that they have split their entire city into districts, which I thought was really interesting. And that they mentioned there's a downtown core, which is where that laboratory is located, which I would love to see an actual map of this and how the entire thing works. But then at the end of the episode, we get to literally see the wall. I got it,
a physical, tangible wall.
A physical, tangible wall, which is like hundreds of feet tall. And has these giant blinking turn back signs on it, which I thought was really funny. Because what else are you supposed to do when you get to a wall that is hundreds of stories high? Did we need the warning? You turn back.
It is. It's so tall. Like they do a wide shot of it, and it's like half a building in the distance. Like you see another building, and this thing is almost towering above it. It's really insane.
It's huge. And then Lucas Estes, that robotics expert they bring in, said this kind of interesting thing where he says anyone this intelligent wouldn't be on that side of the wall. Well, not willingly anyway.
Right? And, like, where would they get the resources? Sort of implying that, like, anything beyond the wall is either radioactive or just, like, destroyed. Or, like...
Right, exactly.
Entirely unusable. And this is the, like, hubris... Oh, what's the word? Like, the hubris of the intelligent of... Why would they be over there?
Yes. Oh, no, so true. Because even at the end of the episode, and Dorian is the one, I think Dorian brought it up earlier in the episode as well, but then he says it again at the end where he says, what if Vaughn isn't trying to escape? What if Vaughn isn't trying to hide? What if he's going beyond the wall to build this huge lab? And Maldonado's just brushes it off. She's like, nope, absolutely not. Wouldn't go beyond the wall. And then the episode ends. You know, they think it's more likely that he would go to some old shipyards or that he would go to these subway tunnels, which, by the way, were destroyed by a light bomb attack that they just casually mention. Super scary.
Right? No one should have a light bomb on a subway. No one. You should scan for that. Like, that doesn't, nope, no.
But it happened. There was a light bomb attack in some subway tunnels, and now they're abandoned. So that's where Valerie thinks that Dr. Vaughn is hiding. But nope, he just zipped up over the wall.
I know. One of those like black ops, we're gonna send down a rope for you, and you're gonna have a little device that just makes you go zzz.
And that's it. That's where the episode ends. Which, of course, the first thing I text Joy is like, oh my gosh, can't wait for the next episode. It's going to be so great. Is he going to build an army of evil Dorians? Is Dorian going to have to go up against an army of himself but evil? And Joy was like, well, tell me what you said.
I literally was just like, oh, I'm sorry. Did you want closure in this show? Because this show is not about closure. And you were like, he's not even in the next episode, is he? And I was like, no, of course he's not. Of course he's not. They don't come back to this. Actually, I can't even say that. I feel like they don't come back to this thread.
Certainly not in the next episode. And can I add, we then looked up the original episode order, and the episode directly after this was supposed to be Simon Says. So even as originally written, the next episode has nothing to do with Vaughn. Because he's just over the wall, and I guess the entire police force is like, well, there's no way he'd go over the wall. Let's just continue combing the city for him. So that's just on the back burner. They're checking the subway tunnels and the old shipyards. Where could Dr. Vaughn be?
This seems to be their MO. I feel like they're just like, let's just look for stuff. Like the evidence locker. Like, let's just look for it. What if we just looked for it? What if we, like, look for it? And I'm just like, but what if you never find it?
This poor police force. They're just so...
I know.
They're so outmatched. They are so wildly outmatched by the criminals around them. Outmatched and, I guess, under-resourced. I mean, they have money to spend on MXs that they keep casually destroying, but not just money to spend... Casually destroying, but not money to spend on, you know, creating things that can detect light bombs before they're put in subway tunnels, equipping their officers with tactical gear that is actually bulletproof. You know, the little things.
I think that brings us to the end of it.
I agree. We got to the end
we've gotten to the end of the episode, but I will say this was definitely in my top 5.
Oh yeah,
episodes.
This is a great
I enjoyed
episode.
This episode a ton, and I highly recommend watching this episode.
This was an excellent episode.
Let us think about it too hard.
You enjoy it. We'll think about it after and write the fic.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Between now and our next episode, we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, have you ever thrown up during a school field trip? If so, why? Or you can email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com.
Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the people over the wall about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.